So folks, my question to Josh and they were to come in and sit in on our session with a view to providing some information on our spearfishing and how it affects us when we're diving around apex predators. So it is, the class I was running was an introduction to spearfishing and underwater collecting. And today we're doing the fourth in the session in the series, where we're talking a little bit about the sharks, the groupers, the apex predators. I want to welcome all of you who have joined us this evening. This presentation is courtesy Sea Life Marine, Dive TNT, and Omer, the dive company, free dive company out of Europe. For this evening's session, we shall discuss sharks and apex predators, and I do have two renowned experts in the field of shark diving. We're going to talk a little bit about conservation and our interaction with these marine life forms as both scuba divers and or free divers, and as spearfishermen or spearfisherwomen. When we dive, I assure you that our first classes that we've done so far, we've discussed ethical issues and sustainable hunting practices, as well as having safety discussions. Unlike trawlers and longliners that are just cleaning up and picking up everything randomly. We target, when we go spearfishing, only the species that are within the season of a certain size and in limited quantities. We pretty much follow the similar guidelines as set forth by the Florida Fish and Wildlife Commission. And we also respect and treasure our marine environment. We collect underwater trash, plastics. As anyone that dives with us knows, we're not going to leave it there. We're going to pick it up, because if you leave the plastics in the sea, things like turtles think it's a jellyfish and they're going to eat it and then suffocate themselves. We also not hunt in protected areas, such as the Bucco Reef Speyside area. If you're in Trinidad and Tobago, other parts of the Caribbean where it's protected, you should not be hunting. And we try to be responsible divers and friends of the ocean, of course. This chat this evening will address some of the following topics. We're going to talk about sharks and apex predators. We're talking about spearfishing around these apex predators, how they behave and how they act and react to us. We're going to talk a little bit about feeding these predators and hook removals, as well as some of the biology and the behavior of the sharks, as well as a little bit about the tourism and conservation. This evening, we are joined by two special guests, as I mentioned earlier, and they are friends of mine. We have Lauren and Josh. We'll just ask them to say hello, Lauren, Josh.
Hello. Hi guys, nice to see everyone.
Hello, how is everyone doing?
Both Lauren and Josh dive professionally as shark handlers on a very regular basis once the sea conditions permit safe diving. And these days, we're not getting good conditions, so these divers are literally stuck on shore while the sharks are literally missing them out there. I'm going to start asking Lauren for a little input now. If I can ask you all, those of you that are on, have your videos on, could you just turn your videos off, please? Turn your videos off so that the bandwidth is not going to be affected. If you don't mind, just turn your video off and stay muted. So I'm going to turn you over to Lauren first, ladies first. So Lauren, I'm just going to ask you a couple questions to introduce yourself, maybe where you're from, what got you into diving, and how long you've been interacting with sharks. Lauren, over to you.
Awesome. So hey everyone, my name is Lauren Mezzanotti. I currently work as a shark handler and dive master for Calypso Dive Charters, which is out of West Palm Beach in Florida. I am originally from New Jersey, which is in the snowy part of the United States. I came down here to Florida to study marine biology at the University of Miami at the Rosenstiel School of Marine and Atmospheric Science. I graduated there a couple years ago with a degree in marine affairs and policy and conservation, along with a degree in psychology. And I've been diving and focusing on sharks for about 3 to 4 years now.
Thanks, Lauren. How about you, Josh? Could you tell us a little bit about yourself, please?
I've been a shark handler for quite a while, but right now, for the last 5.5 years, I've been working for Emerald Charters in Jupiter, Florida, and I do a lot of local spearfishing in the water, underwater, scuba, and freediving. And I'm originally from Arizona, so I grew up in the desert and decided to go to the ocean. Crazy things.
Okay, great. Can I also ask you, could you tell us a little bit about, Lauren, I'll ask you first. What do you enjoy or love most about interacting with sharks? That's a picture of Lauren, by the way.
Yeah, so I love diving with sharks specifically to look at their personalities and behavior, because for me, it was fascinating to go through school and learn that there's not really a lot of research on shark behavior. So every dive we're doing, we're basically just observing shark behavior and watching their individual personalities. And people don't think or believe me when I say sharks have personalities, but they do. Some of our sharks have names, and some like interaction, some don't, and it's just really cool to watch their behavior and to show people the different side of sharks.
Thanks, Lauren. How about you, Josh?
I really like interacting with the sharks because of how misunderstood they are. Every time I go diving with someone, on the way out, you just see sometimes straight fear because they have that unknown. And I love showing that they're not this Jaws species. They're just totally misunderstood. And I love changing the bad reputation they have.
Oh, that's great. When we introduced you at first, we talked about the fact that many people consider you all to be professional shark divers, and some would even say shark handlers. Could you tell us a little bit about what we should expect, or what you mean when you say you're a shark handler?
Now, shark handling, I always try to clarify and make sure that people don't just hear us say shark feeders, because we're not the zoo. This is wild animals that we're dealing with. And sometimes when we're with them, we don't even feed. Just having that blood in the water, we could have them come in. So we're trained instructors who pretty much feed with the sharks, just to bring awareness, shark conservation, taking people safely face to face to show just exactly, that they're not this vicious monster that that we're needed. We need them more than anything to make sure that our ocean grows.
Right.
And also going along with that, by shark handling, there's a lot of training that's involved in it. I met Josh by actually training under him as a shark feeder. So you start off safety diving and learning how to understand the divers and kind of organizing the group, and then it moves into learning their different behaviors, so how their behavior varies from species to species and even individual to individual, and then also handling the divers while keeping everyone safe, the sharks, the divers, everyone comfortable and having a great experience.
Great. Just going to finish this off here. Great. So you guys have been diving for a while. Can I ask you a little bit about your journey to getting where you are as a shark handler, shark diver? What's your journey been like?
So my journey started in Miami. I went to the University of Miami, and that's where I got certified to scuba dive. I actually fell in love with sharks with Myrtle the turtle at the New England Aquarium. She was the most beautiful thing I saw when I was 3 years old, and I always wanted to dive and interact with sea creatures. But basically through learning about and through diving with sharks, my interest changed from sea turtles and dolphins to sharks, just purely by the fascination that I saw diving with them. So I was in Miami for a little bit, training as a feeder on Emerald with Josh, and then I moved and kind of upgraded to being the main feeder on Calypso, which is out of an inlet south of that in West Palm Beach.
Okay, great. And Josh, how about you?
I've had quite a bit of experience with them, but when I was growing up, my parents used to always take me to SeaWorld, and I know everyone has weird mixed opinions on aquariums, but I wouldn't be where I am today without that, because I would go there and just sit in the shark tank and just sit and stare and watch and watch and watch. And then as I got older, again, living in Arizona, I went through a divorce, and my dad actually took me on a cruise and was like, we're going to try something different. So when we tried something different, I tried scuba diving and then just started building pretty much a resume of doing different teaching, instructing. I was in St. Croix for a while. When I was in St. Croix is when I really started learning about Caribbean reefs, because I would kill lionfish because we wouldn't eat them over there because they had such bad ciguatera. So when I throw them up, we'd have Caribbean reefs come right up, and I just wanted to learn more and more. So I started going to the Bahamas. I worked in Hawaii, and then I came back down to Florida to work with them now.
Great. Well, let's get into some of the nitty-gritty of the shark dive itself. You guys will prepare beforehand. You'll usually brief the divers, and then we get into the water. I've been on trips with you, Josh, many times, and I've had Lauren dive with me and with you already. I've seen what you've done. You do a little bit of shark feeding, and you have stuff in the water. You get the sharks interested and come around. So could you tell us a little bit about your shark feeding and the effects of the feeding on the behavior of the sharks that you interact with, please?
Now, as for effects, there's not so much effects because we're already in the migration pattern that they are. Because the Gulf Stream is so close to Jupiter, Florida, we get everything that kind of takes pit stops. So they kind of stop in. We don't give them enough food to sustain them. For example, when we were during the pandemic, we saw Degini, which is our tiger shark. And then the whole time during quarantine, of course, we were locked up and not out at sea. When we came back, she was right there, not aggressive, not skinny, and then left on her first migration. It was right at the beginning of August.
So they don't really, they've also studied them as well to show that their feeding really doesn't have too much of an effect on their migration. Actually, the University of Miami and Neil Hammerschlag did a shark study on the migration of tiger sharks. It was called Don't Bite the Hand That Feeds, Assessing Ecological Impacts on Provisioning Ecotourism on an Apex Marine Predator. And their summary basically found that Tiger Beach was actually just simply in the migration route. Their hypothesis was that tiger sharks would stay really localized, and a lot of people near Tiger Beach actually thought that they were residents there year-round. And their tagging in that study specifically found in Florida and in Tiger Beach that they migrate just like any other shark they tag. It just so happens that Tiger Beach and where we are in Florida, basically where the Gulf Stream is, we're a stop on their migration route. So they don't stay as close as they thought. Yes, they stay here for a couple months, but then they just continue their migration. And they studied this over a course of 4 or 5 years, the University of Miami did, to show that there really wasn't any effect in them, like, for example, staying at Tiger Beach year-round and not migrating just due to the food. They basically continued on their migration. We basically just provide a little snack and an extra kind of smell for them to come in and check us out for us to view them on their migration.
Mm-hmm. When you see the migration, do they tend to, there's always, when you listen to the advertisements in the Bahamas, they talk about Tiger Beach and it being active pretty much all the year round with tiger sharks. Is that correct or no?
Yeah, so it's kind of correct. There is a time of year where, for example, you can have 9 to 10 tiger sharks at Tiger Beach. And very similar to us in Florida, there's a time of year between like March to May where we can have a good number of tiger sharks. So just like anything, basically they migrate throughout the entire year. So there's a certain time of year where they are more concentrated than others. Any time of year when you dive Tiger Beach or when you dive here, you have a possibility of seeing a tiger shark. It's just a little greater in the winter time when the waters are a little cooler.
Right. Okay. Gotcha. Next, I want to just turn to Josh for a little while because part of the course that we're running is about spearfishing. Many divers who are here are either spearfisher men or women or lionfish hunters, and therefore, if you're hunting anything at all underwater, there's a possibility that a shark can be in the area or another apex predator that's interested in whatever you are interested in. So I'm going to turn to Josh and ask Josh a little bit about shark behavior around spearfishermen and women and versus the non-spearfishing person. in terms of safety and so on. Could you just give us a little feedback on that then, Josh?
Now, with spearing, you've got to remember we shoot what they're eating. So their behavior change when we're fishing, or if the fish is actively dying or is weak, that's what they're going to come for. So of course, the behavior isn't aggressive. It's more of like a hunting mode after the fish. So when we're down there, being aware of your gun, knowing the distance of how far your gun goes. Like what I do a lot of times is when I'm on a boat is I'll take the gun, actually the spear shaft out of the gun, and go exactly how far it goes. So you know where your aim is. So being able to know, take your time, try to do those stone shots instead of just, trust me, we all been there where we take those shots where we kind of do that stretch Armstrong where we're just hoping we get it. That's being responsible. That's saying, okay, I have to take this responsibility of getting this fish. So like using lift bags, like for us, because we're in so much current, we have to do lift bags and the boat picks them up. Some places, of course, you can't have it with you. So I always say never hook whatever you've shot or caught to you. Always have that hooked to your gun or somewhere that you can actually get away from it if the sharks do come in.
Of course, you wouldn't want to have it hooked to you unless you want to see sharks close up like you do.
A little too close.
Not that close, though. Folks, I do remember on one occasion, anybody that dives with me knows I've got lots of stories, but I won't share too many, other than the fact that one day I was there with Josh and I was hunting. I think we were out on the ledge and I shot a bonito for the box. And when I shot it, there was just blood all around me and I could barely see anything around me. And I just felt this hand reach over from behind. And that was, sure enough, it was Josh grabbing me and the fish, making sure that I wasn't breakfast for one of the bull sharks. Josh, how about responsibility and being responsible spear fishermen around sharks? Can you address that?
Like if you know, I don't have my gun with me at the time, but what I do is keeping the fish populated healthy. Don't always shoot the biggest one. You know, when they come in, sometimes we don't get to pick. But at the same time, if you see also a school of something, don't go for the biggest one just because you need a trophy. Go for what you're going to be able to feed. Mark your gun. Know your limits. I know some people say, "Oh well, you have a mark on your gun." I have a mark on my gun that I could pull up and push on near a cobia, and I know without a doubt I don't have to worry about, oh, it might be short. Because if you're shooting short fish, you're wasting a fish. Because one, when you get on the boats, we're going to size it. We're going to know exactly what the size is. And if it's short, we're going to throw it back. So if we throw it back, we now just, yeah, the sharks will get it, something will eat it, but why risk the chance of us ruining a population? Only shoot what you can land or eat. I'm a strong believer. Don't get me wrong. Some people have to fish to make money or to live. My ideal is shoot what you're going to eat. And now if you're going to give it to a couple friends or family, that's different. But if you start doing it for money, you forget that this is a fish. You forget that you're wiping out the ocean and you're going for the big money. So
that's good to hear, Josh. When we do our spear fishing, as I mentioned earlier, we want to try and be sustainable, and we're not just hunting and killing any and everything that passes in front of us, and we're certainly not hunting and killing for a trophy or for a photo on Facebook or Instagram, as the case may be. I like the idea of marking your gun, Josh. That's a good idea, so that you know what the approximate, legal size would be. And of course, we're trying to take what would be considered, in inverted commas, a legal size, because we want the fish to be at a certain size to be able to continue reproducing and so forth. Josh, what do you consider to be an apex predator that may pose a risk to spear fishermen or women in the Florida Atlantic waters? And a lot of this will also apply to us in the Caribbean to some extent.
I would have to say the biggest predator isn't sharks, it's Goliath groupers. If anything, I watch out more for Goliath groupers than I do sharks. But of course, Goliath groupers are predators, sharks are predators. I've even shot little fish to, or limit fish, and I've had Jack Crevalles come and take it. So you never know what the actual predator is, but you always want to know what you're surrounded by. If you're diving down, free diving, you want to know if there's a Goliath grouper, because I've seen Goliath groupers turn into a dart and just come straight over me. So also I would have to say turtles. I know it's bad, but if you're sitting there and you have your lobster bag or something like that, and a loggerhead comes in, those loggerheads could crush a conch shell in half. So if that my hand's there, I'm gonna avoid that more than anything. Those are mainly our Florida predators.
Great, that's very interesting to hear. We in the Caribbean, more so in the Southern Caribbean, we don't really see or hear much of the Goliath groupers nor the loggerheads there. We do see some of the reef turtles, such as the hawksbill, the green turtle, and so forth, but they're not. They won't. They're not as aggressive, and they're not certainly as strong as the loggerhead. The other item we're going to talk a little bit more about is the sharks, perhaps. Sharks have a certain behavior. You have so many different species. How do the sharks behave? Perhaps the bull sharks, if you can talk about them.
Sure. Like bull sharks are probably one of my favorite sharks. The way they move, the pecking order they have an alpha. So when you see a huge number of bulls, you could actually see the more dominant one. So they're just incredible to watch. They're also stealthy hunters. Like when people say, oh, they drop their fins down, that's the way of controlling how fast they're moving in, how fast they control themselves. Like I've had them completely stop. There's pictures of me taking hooks out, and the bulls are actually turning their fins completely up, and it's almost like a brake. So like an airplane. They're not aggressive, as media always says. The bad reputation is due because their habitats cross humans. So like fresh water, shallow water, they've had them in 0.1% salinity. So they've been all the way up in Mississippi. They have bad eyesight. It's made mainly for murky water. So sharks, with their vision, is like if you took your mask off, you could still see underwater. You just can't see the detail. And that's why they get such a bad reputation.
Okay. Great. What other sharks do you get around here that you interact with, and how do the others behave as well compared?
What's nice about us is we get different sharks all year round. We just gotta wait their migration. Like lemons and reefs, their migration is a lot less, so they're a little more territorial. They almost have like a pack mentality. With them, they just come in. They're very in your face. It's not that they're aggressive. They're like a puppy mixed with a boa constrictor. They are swimming around you right here, going, "Hey, you got snacks? You got snacks?" And tigers, they're easier to shoot off. Like if there's big cobias or anything on a tiger, I would shoot at that faster than I would a lemon or, for example, a bull. Tigers, just when you shoot, they take this nice big pattern. Unless you're making big, movements underwater, they do this big pattern, and they're a little more predictable. And also sneaky in a percent. The reason is because a lot of tigers get you in that pattern, and then you're looking for it, and they'll change that pattern. So we just got to be more aware with them around. Then we get sandbars, we get silkies, and we get duskies. They're more seasonal. There are summer sharks, but they are very investigating. So if we're on the ledge shooting, pretty much I've had them where I've shot and sandbars will come right over me, quick, super quick. They're smaller, more agile, and it's incredible to see. That's why I love being here, because the migration is different all year round.
Do you actually recognize, you mentioned earlier that they have personalities. Do you actually recognize some of the sharks, and do you think they recognize you?
I definitely recognize some of the sharks. Some of them, they're coming in too quick and out. We can't see the markings properly. Like our tigers, we have two very common ones. We have Jenny and Patrick. Their names, you could tell by just their markings. As for knowing us, I wouldn't say they know us, because if they knew us, I would think that would change their migration a little bit. I'm sure that you probably get familiar with the sounds, like when we're tapping in water. It's like walking through the desert. If you're out of water and you hear a noise, you're going to go check that out, right? Same thing in the ocean. We think there's all these fish everywhere, and there's plenty of fish, well, there's really not. So with sharks, as they're moving through the ledge or deep water, shallow water, if they're hearing commotion or anything like that, they'll go check it out. Not so much, oh, I'm going to go eat it, but they're going to go, hey, what is that? Is that weak, dying? Can we investigate, kind of thing?
Mm-hmm. Okay. Would you say that there is a shark that may be predictable?
Predictable. I would probably have to say a tiger shark, because again, they get in that big pattern where they're going always the same way, and you could kind of predict. For example, if I see a tiger and it's got a cobia on it or a nice fish on it, I'll start watching how it's moving, and then I could pretty much, as it's swimming by the fish, I could time it to where I'll shoot it, and I could pretty much take care of that whole fish, put it on a stringer, and then send it up on a lift bag before that tiger even comes back.
Okay, in terms of technique, just for a moment there, when you actually shoot a fish underwater, you're not going to keep it with you in a game bag or on a stringer. You're going to put it on a lift bag and send it up for the boat captain to pick up.
Correct.
Is that correct? Correct.
Yeah.
And that's assuming that the shark or other predators aren't going to go after it and take it before it gets up to the top.
Which happens a lot more than you would think. There's a reason why they call them the taxman. They're going to take what's part of their home, and especially for food. So I definitely believe it. When you take it, what we do is we take a lift bag and we'll actually put a clip that we could hook onto the fish and actually send it straight up. So we put air into that lift bag and it takes it up, and it's usually floating on the surface. And what the boat will do is come by and gaff it and pick it up. The reason is we can't keep it honest. If we kept it honest, if it was a smaller fish like a hogfish or something, we could just put it right into the crate that I have with me. But anything bigger, it'd be hanging out of the crate and it'd just not be able to control it. Yeah.
Okay. Really. For a spearfisherman or a spearfisher woman, what would you suggest to avoid shark attacks in general?
Know your waters. Like when you're diving down, if you're free diving, sit on the surface, kind of scout out the whole little area. I guess you're looking for your fish that you're scouting. And with diving, know your area, be looking around. Don't just shoot a fish and let it go flying. Try to stone it. Try to get those better shots. Having those shots where you're shooting at the very little edge of it. Try to get closer. Slow down your breathing. Control your buoyancy. Get closer to fish. And like I do, I send fish up on a bag and never have it attached to you. It doesn't matter where you are. Never have a stringer that you're going to hook it through you and hook it on you. Again, any kind of predator can come and grab that. And again, safety first.
Okay. And Josh, is there a most dangerous shark in your view?
The most dangerous shark, I guess it wouldn't be a shark. I guess it would be called a human. The danger is always, it's a shark. You can't say, oh, it's never going to get you. It's never going to mess with you. But, hang on. Sorry, I lost where I was. I wouldn't say there are dangerous sharks. you know, that's knowing your surrounding, making sure that you're taking care of what you shoot. Because again, if you're just letting it fly around, you're going to have a shark come and get it. But I wouldn't say there is a particular dangerous shark.
Okay, sounds good. What about you mentioned earlier the Goliath groupers as being fairly aggressive. So you mentioned the Goliath groupers, the loggerheads, and the sharks. Could you tell us about the Goliath groupers maybe versus the sharks and your interactions with them out there?
Yeah, sure. Sharks are intelligent, so they're going to go after very easy prey. They're not going to waste their energy because, again, they don't know how long until they'll eat again. So they're not just going to waste all that energy to go and try to get that bait. With groupers, Goliath groupers, they are massive fish. They are like a torpedo with no teeth, but it's still, they have bass teeth. It's like really small teeth that can shred a little bit, but they do not stop. Sharks, you could kind of avoid them, kind of slowly push them away. With a grouper, there's no pushing them away. You push them away, they just push you out of the way and eat you and the fish. But yeah, with groupers, the aggregation, there's certain times down here in West Palm that we won't even shoot near certain wrecks because we could have 1 to 50 Goliath groupers on one wreck. Think about one coming after you. Now think about 50 of them coming after you. It's not ideal. So of course, those couple months that they aggregate, we avoid those areas.
Mm-hmm. Well, I could certainly add to that, Josh, because as you've seen, and I've seen you laughing at me already, I still go ahead and take a shot, and then I have to deal with the groupers, and I tell you, the sharks don't bother me at all. It's the groupers. I mean, I know I think they hear the trigger of the gun go off, and they don't wait. They just come right in after us. So.
They follow you.
They do. They wait for your shot, and they're not going to give it to you. They're just going to attack. So I think with the groupers, to me personally, I think they're the ones that I tend to look out for a lot. But of course, if you got lemons hanging about and following you, then they're of concern. Folks, I just want to mention as well something about Josh and I guess Lauren maybe getting into that as well. I'm not sure she can tell us about it for herself. But Josh does something that I sometimes absolutely cannot believe he's doing. And that is, he's so concerned about the sharks sometimes that he's now removing the hooks from the shark's mouth. Some of the earlier pictures you saw showed shots where the sharks, fishermen are on their boats. They've got their lines in the water. They've got their hooks, sometimes big, huge hooks. And you'll see Josh literally interacting with the sharks and getting those hooks out of the shark's mouth. How the sharks know that he's not going to injure them, or how they decide they're not going to try to eat him as well, they don't. They let him take it out. And I'd like to ask Josh to tell us a little bit about the handling of the sharks for hook removals, why we shouldn't do it, but what allows you to do it, and how do you go about knowing when it's safe to remove the hook, and how does it affect the shark in terms of their ability to eat normally? If you can tell us a little bit about that.
Now, excuse me, doing hook removal, it was kind of like a learning curve, a trial and error. I don't want to just grab onto a shark, because we never want to just promote touching sharks and trying to do any kind of things like that. So what I did was, at first, I learned how to take hooks out. What I did was I actually went and got a big steak from Publix or the supermarket, and then I put a whole bunch of different hooks that I gotten from different shark or different fishermen or found on the beach. And I just try to work with them different ways, how the fastest way would be to take it out. Because again, we don't have a lot of time. Once I actually connect with them, once I touch that hook at all, it's painful. Of course, it's like a piercing. So to me or you, if you hit something and you have a piercing and I hit it, of course it's gonna hurt you. And also, like I've had sharks where, like this picture exactly, if you look closely, that shark actually has 3 different hooks. It's actually closing its mouth closed. So that's actually me and Lauren working on it. Just what we do is we always try to take the hooks out, because a lot of times, here, let me show you. Like we have hooks like this. You know, you probably can't see that. With a big hook, that's, you know, my hand isn't small. And then it's got usually a wire leader behind it. So the main thing I do is, yes, I want to get the hook out, but I try to slowly cut these line. If it's fishing line, I try to cut that. And then if it's wire, I try to get to that as fast as possible. Because again, if this is hanging off your mouth and this is back here, over time of them constantly moving, it's starting to rub the shark raw. You'll see in their fins that it actually start cutting into their fins, and like their face, for example, right there, that looks like a fisherman who caught it and maybe the shark fought so hard that it ripped it out. So, you know, with the sharks, like we could watch, anytime they have hooks in, they'll start yawning more. It looks like they're like opening their mouth, trying to adjust it. And I don't know, I've always felt bad, like us as humans are doing something wrong, and if I could prevent that, I'm going to try. So that's why I started. For the longest time, I would do it by hand, and then I use different tools. Excuse me. I'll use pliers. For the bigger hooks, I can't use pliers. I have to actually use my hand, because it'd just rip those pliers right in half. I've taken gaffs out, small gaffs. If you look, I got this. This is a hand gaff that was actually inside the top of a shark's head. Me and Randy Jordan on Emerald, we flipped these silkies and actually took this out of their head. So I don't know, I've just always been passionate about trying to fix what us humans have done wrong, in a sense. So that's why I'm always a big fan on taking the hooks out. I'll actually stop eating sharks, so that I could actually focus on just that one shark to try to get those hooks out.
Do you try to put them into that tonic immobility state before you do that, or at all?
Now, if you look at that picture, I'm grabbing the top of its nose.
Yeah.
Once you touch a shark's nose, it's kind of like a overload of senses. They call it tonic immobility. Lauren, of course, the specialist, will be able to tell you a lot more detail, exactly the proper name, exactly how it is. What I do is, a lot of times people think, oh, once they're in tonic forever. No, you only have a few seconds. Like, as you see in that picture, that's me grabbing onto that shark. I only had maybe a second, 10 seconds before that shark starts moving. Because again, sharks have to continuously swim to breathe. So with me stopping them, it's almost like I'm making them hold their breath for a second. So then they'll start to move, and then I'll just slowly let them go. The main thing about taking hooks out is knowing when to let go and work on that hook later. You know, you don't want to make it to where that shark is so bothered or hurt that it doesn't want to even be around you.
That's really interesting to hear, Josh, the way you go about that. And as you say, it's over time you develop that relationship and ability to know. So how do you know when it's safe to attempt a hook removal?
As for when it's safe, it's one, a lot of times I'll put my hands up like this, and if it's a new hook, the shark will actually divert himself to stay away from me because it's still so painful. So as for when it's safe, again, some people will say never. I get familiar with the sharks. I see how their behaviors are, how they're moving. If they're real moving in and out real intently, I'm going to leave them alone. If they're kind of slowly coming in, like I've had sharks come and actually bump into me until I actually grab them. And then try to work on hooks. I've had them actually stay not moving at all until I've actually had to hold hook out.
Okay. And is there a time when you would not attempt to remove a hook at all?
A a couple years ago, you can't again, I'll put my hand over it. A couple years ago, I took this out of the stomach of a lemon shark. Of course, it went viral and whatever. But at first, it was on the stomach, and I slowly kind of thought it was like a parasite. So I kind of swiped at it to see, and I actually saw this little bit on the end kind of move back and forth like it would be metal. And I just slowly worked it out, and that shark just pretty much came right back to me every time, kind of like it knew I was trying to help it. As soon as I got it completely out, that shark went and swam away, came right back to me, and like bumped into me. For the next like couple of days after, every time we were diving that site, that shark would come and bump right into me. So I wouldn't say he remembered me, but at the same time, I hope so. Tell a friend that I'm good, I guess.
Josh, do you feel afraid in any way of the sharks?
No.
Okay.
As for being afraid, you know, there's definitely situations that you'll have more sharks bumping into you. You'll have more intense feelings. But as for being afraid, I've never been actually afraid of sharks.
Okay.
Groupers, on the other hand.
Okay. And is there a difference between the stainless steel hooks versus the regular hooks and how it affects the sharks?
The main difference between like a stainless and a steel is rusting time. Hooks only rust on the outside. Let's see if I can show you this. If you see, only right on the end here is rusted. Everything else is still shiny. So what happens is when it's rusted in there on the outside, only that outside, because it's getting hit by the salt and whatever breaks it down, it'll break right there, but that whole other piece will still be stuck in that shark's mouth. If you look at the Ginny, I've been working with her and taking hooks out of her for quite some time. There's one really deep down in her side of her mouth. There's no way that I could get it. But I definitely try.
Okay, great. The main apex predators, as you say then, are the sharks, the Goliath groupers, and the loggerhead turtles. Do you see a difference between a freediving spearfisherman or woman versus a diver who's hunting on scuba? So the freediver versus the scuba diver. Is there a difference when they're in the water and how they interact with the sharks and the marine life, the prey they're after?
I would definitely say there is a difference from what I've observed from me freediving to watching other freediving to normal diving. When you're on scuba, it's almost foreign to the sharks. When you're making bubbles, the tank makes like noises. So sharks tend to be a little more cautious, scared of us to come in with the big bubbles. It's like something that's very big coming by. With freediving, you're more quiet. Your sharks, I wouldn't say are less afraid of you because again, you're something big moving around. But they will come in and check a lot more. When I was freediving a lot more, I would see, again, you make that noise, so they're gonna come check it out. With scuba diving, sometimes we have to really shoot a lot of fish, get that blood in the water to even get those sharks close to us. That's why having fresh blood is a difference. But with freediving, you do see a difference because again, you can't stop. You're going down. You're focusing on getting that shot. You shoot. You go back up. And then also with rebreathers, you're not even allowed to go spearfishing or lobstering. Is because you're cheating because same as freediving, they come right up to you. So that's why you're not allowed to use rebreathers and spear or lobster. But with freediving, you're freediving down. You're taking that challenge of being down, holding your breath, taking care of the fish, and getting back to the surface.
Right. Josh, is there a particular time that you would choose not to be around hunting with sharks and Goliaths and other predators?
Not so much hunting around. But there is a difference from when the moon cycle, when it's usually 2 days before a full moon and 2 days after a full moon, just like anything, us humans, like you always hear the hospitals are more crazier during full moons. Same thing with sharks. They're controlled by the currents and water pretty much. We do see that they're not more aggressive, but they're more agile. They're more in that hunt attitude on those full moons. I don't know if it's a feeding cycle or if it's just how the moon affects them, from everything from Goliath groupers to coral spawning. It's always usually on the full moon, new moon, again, the full moons.
Okay, great. Josh, I just had a question from one of the divers. They asked if they're in an area that is not known to have sharks and sharks around or coming up to divers as they might when you go diving. Is there a way that someone could start working towards shark tourism, maybe getting sharks to come and hang out with us a little more?
As for that, again, you've got to find out what the regulations are in your area. Like, for example, in the Florida area, or usually the United States, we have to be at least 3 miles off of out-of-state waters. So you know, you don't want to just go get a bucket of fish and go get in the water. Make sure that you're following the right guidelines so that you're staying in regulations. Now, as for baiting sharks in an area that isn't known for it, if you know, trial and error. If you put your finger in the water and taste it and it tastes like salt, there could be sharks there. You know what I mean? But you have to really find out what the regulations are in your area, and again, how close you are to the beach, how safe you, again, as everything comes into safety.
Okay, great. Thanks a lot. Josh, I want to switch over to Lauren for a little while, and let's talk a little bit about the shark behaviors, biology, and so forth. So Lauren, if I could jump over to you for a bit. Can I ask you, I want to just actually turn it all over to you and ask you to talk a little bit about the shark biology and behavior, maybe the role of the sharks in the ocean, why they're important, little education and conservation as well. I think you're one of your lecturers are here from your university, so you gotta be good. So just hang it over to you.
Thanks. So I'm just going to touch on and basically expand a lot of what Josh talked about. So in terms of the biology and behavior of sharks, everything on how they act and how they work underwater goes back to their evolution. So sharks are basically the top apex predator in the aquatic environment, and they have evolved before the dinosaur. They evolved about 400 million years ago. And through their life in the ocean, they have evolved to be the top apex predator in terms of everything: energy conservation, how fast they go towards prey. So there's a couple things that sharks have specifically that no other fish or any other thing has. Josh talked about it, and the biggest thing is the Ampullae of Lorenzini, which I think in the one shot that Ron has, there's these little dots on the front of the nose of sharks. With tiger sharks, they're really obvious. So those little black dots, called Ampullae of Lorenzini, they're actually kind of like blackheads, how we have on our nose, but they're jelly-filled pores that sense electrical vibrations in the water. So right now, as we're thinking, our brains are firing neurons, electrons, and we're actually giving off an electrical vibration. The same thing happens with a dead and dying fish. It's giving off a vibration of fear, panic. That's why people say sharks can sense fear. It's a lot to do with that Ampullae of Lorenzini, that they can sense that panicked prey fish in the water. And they can also detect and basically track down that dying fish by a second sense that they have, which is called the lateral line system. So even in that picture on the tiger shark, you can see that lateral line a little bit when they turn. It's directly down the side of their body, right down there on that left side of the tiger. That's called a lateral line system. And it's actually a system down the side of the body that is basically a bunch of hairs, and they move with vibration. So if a fish is dying and panicking at the surface, those hairs move, and you can watch the shark basically hone in on the predator or on the prey and go right after them. So between the Ampullae of Lorenzini and the dermal and the lateral line system, those are their two biggest adaptations to hunting prey. And over the course of their evolution, the other cool thing about sharks is they've developed something called dermal denticles. So their skin is actually made of teeth. So if you zoom in on the shark's skin over years of evolution, their teeth actually evolved back towards their skin. So their skin is really tough. And it's basically like a nice armor and protection over them. And then the final adaptation they have is a cartilage skeleton, which helps them move really quick in the water. It helps them move from different depths a lot quicker than bony skeletons as well. And then the next slide that Ron is going to show, which Josh and I have a lot of people that ask all the time, even with Patrick, what is the difference between a male and a female shark? So a male shark has two appendages, which are called claspers. So those two claspers stick out on the bottom of a shark right there circled in red. If you see a shark and you look at the entire bottom of the shark and it's completely smooth, then you have a female shark. If you look at the bottom of the shark and below the two anal fins, so those are the two fins right there, they're behind the second caudal fin. So right below the end of the shark, if you see two little appendages sticking out the bottom, those are their claspers, and they have two of them because it's very, very rare for sharks to encounter a female in the wild. So when a male does encounter a female, then actually their mating is pretty aggressive. They do bite on the side of the female, and with the two claspers, whichever side they bite on, they can have access to go ahead and mate with those, basically their claspers. So that's the difference between male and females. A lot of their behavior has evolved around these traits. So like what Josh was saying, sharks are never out to hunt or harm humans. They're out to hunt their prey, which is dead and dying fish. So they're not going to go after a healthy fish. They're not going to go after something that is swimming safely in the ocean because that's expending way too much energy for these sharks. So they're basically just custom built to hunt those dead, dying fish. Another cool part about their biology and behavior is not much is known on their behavior under the water towards divers. Really one of the only studies that's been looked at with sharks is studying testosterone and aggression. And a lot of that goes back to that Jaws mentality that people are really afraid of sharks. So that study was shown to show how aggressive sharks are. And there's really not been any studies to show how nice they are, how much they learn, and basically not that much studies on their behavioral science, which is pretty cool for us to observe underwater. So the next thing I'll talk about the roles of sharks in the ocean and why are they important? Why does everyone scream on the top of their lungs who are scuba divers to save the sharks? And the biggest thing is that the oceans keep balance in our ecosystem. So basically, sharks are our keystone species that help keep everything below them in check. So by eating dead, dying, and diseased fish, they take the disease out of the ocean. For spearfishermen, they help keep their fish population in check. Without sharks, you have really healthy and gross-looking fish to shoot. So they take out all those dead and diseased fish so that basically there's a healthy fish population. So the way I like to explain it is that the sharks are basically this giant net that naturally controls fish population. So a great example that I use, which was basically brought to me by the project doing Shark Specialty and kind of showing, basically it's called a top-down approach. So basically sharks keep that whole balance, right? So tiger sharks, as we know, are designed to eat sea turtles. So what happens if you cut off the top, if you take out tiger sharks, right? You take out tiger sharks and then we have an excess of sea turtles, and sea turtles start coming, basically blooming, and we have an excess of sea turtles. Those sea turtles are now going to eat all the turtle grass. The turtle grass is now going to die out and create an algal bloom, and the result of that algal bloom is going to be depleted oxygen in that bay or estuary. So simply by taking out a top predator, you have now decreased the overall oxygen in the ocean because nothing is kind of checking itself in the ocean. So if the sharks die out and if we kill them at a rate that's unsustainable, the ocean is really going to show some differences in terms of fish die-outs and stuff like that. So we want to keep a healthy population on the top and kind of keep everything else in check. So yeah, they're the keystone species. But unfortunately with all of this, they're definitely being killed at an unsustainable rate for many years, and that's what us doing shark diving and shark conservation is trying to bring light to show people that sharks are basically worth a lot more alive than they are dead. So getting into that whole worth more alive than dead, sharks have a couple of features that make them extremely vulnerable to overfishing and to extinction. They take a long time to reach sexual maturity. So when a shark basically takes a long time to be able to mate and reproduce, they also have long gestation periods, and they give birth to a small number of pups. There is a large, basically the top three that are threats to sharks: overfishing, which is definitely the largest contributor; bycatch, which is accidentally catching a fish or accidentally catching a shark while maybe, let's say, you're targeting tuna or sailfish; and then finning as well, which is a practice that happens over in Asia, where they take the fins off the sharks for shark fin soup and stuff like that. So sharks are killed at a rate of about 100 million sharks a year. To give you an idea, every hour that we sit here, 11,000 sharks are killed, and this is legal. The biggest thing with this is a legal shark fishery, unfortunately. Pictures like this are taken not in Asia, not in Europe, and they're taken right off the Florida coast. But at the same time, we have to understand that this shark tourism that we do basically is all controlled, and that shark fishing is really controlled by NOAA, and they set a population, they set a limit that people can catch, right? So if you have sharks that reproduce at this rate and sharks die at this rate, they say you can catch this many to keep that population sustainable. But what we're really trying to do, and a lot of countries are trying to do, is flip that from shark fishing to shark ecotourism, to bring light to shark conservation and awareness. So overall, there's been this really big shift that sharks are worth more alive than dead. One of the coolest shifts that I saw was 2 years ago, actually just last year. Those of us who are dive masters get this article, this magazine called Shark Training Magazine. A bull shark, I don't know if you can see it right there, was actually featured on the cover, and the article says "Shark Diving as a Conservation Strategy: How Shark Tourism is Protecting the Global Shark Population." This article was huge. Patty has never endorsed shark fishing or shark feeding and shark ecotourism as a safe conservation strategy, and this article proves that they now have, and they're recognizing the value of ecotourism. That basically that shark that is dead on the boat is worth maybe $35 to $100 versus maybe $35,000 over the course of its lifetime. So a lot of places are trying to turn from ecotourism or basically turn from fishing to ecotourism. It not only generates more money overall, but it also generates more jobs. And the most important part is it's a sustainable income. So with ecotourism, you're taking people out to view these sharks and you're protecting them, versus shark fishing, where you're killing the shark and that's it. There's no sustainability. There's no guarantee that maybe your son will have the same shark fishing lifestyle because you may overfish the ocean. So what's really cool is the other really cool thing that I want to talk about, certain documentaries such as Racing Extinction is showing that by going into other places and basically other countries. This is a list if you want to basically message Ron. He has this list of a couple of the articles that I talked about. The Racing Extinction, that's a link to the shark dive. This article was just published online. And the coolest thing, Racing Extinction was an article that was the fourth most viewed documentary in the United States. It was a combo of Discovery Channel, Animal Planet, and Nat Geo. And the topic of it is we are the generation that's going to be the tipping point. So we're going to be the generation on the top of that mountain that either pushes the sharks back into a good population or that unfortunately pushes them to a point of unsustainability. So we have that responsibility to really show that by taking people out to dive with sharks, they're worth a lot more money than fishing them for a one-time paycheck, basically. So not only are we doing that, we're also doing shark diving as a conservation strategy. So we want to change the reputation. We want to change that Jaws mentality. A lot of people, and I hear it in Florida all the time, that the only good shark is a dead shark. And that is the opposite of what we want to see. People are afraid of what they don't know. So anyone who is afraid of the dark is basically afraid of what's not there, right? So the more that we can take people face to face with these sharks and show them what we see, which is the beauty, how fascinating they are, how peaceful they are to watch and breathtaking, to just be in the presence of a tiger shark like that one right there. You know, when you see your first tiger shark, everything stops. It takes your breath away. They are beautiful and they're not there to hunt or kill you. They're just there basically doing their own thing in the ocean. So we want to turn that fear people have into a fascination of sharks. And ultimately our final goal is that people will only protect what they love. People have to make that connection to, for example, if you see an orca on the television or anything on the television, you're gonna say, oh, that's cool. You see it in real life, you know, have made that physical and emotional connection to that shark. And then when you see a post about someone who, for example, I'm gonna give a great example of my father. I took my dad shark diving for the first time and it blew his mind. He went back to work in Long Island and he said a friend of his was holding up a hammerhead and said, oh, Chris, look how cool this is. I caught a hammerhead shark. My dad said, Lauren, I've never wanted to punch someone more in my life, because you now have this sense that you want to protect those sharks that you dive with, their beauty, and you want to see them next year. You want to see them come back on their migration. So the last thing I'll touch on, combining these things with Josh was talking about, and now learning about their behavior, is how to safely be in the water with sharks and how we take divers safely on these shark experiences. The biggest thing that we tell people is really simple. It goes back to their basic biology and evolution. Don't act like a dead and dying fish, right? If you're flapping around on the water, panicking, anything like that, it's going to get their attention. We're guests entering their home, so we always want to treat these sharks with respect, right? And the biggest thing that we also want to do is proper gear when diving, when we have bait or any food. So, for example, sharks really go on contrast. We want to wear black wetsuits, gloves, hoods, cover anything that sharks may mistake as bait. And then the other cool thing is you really want to also look at choosing responsible dive operators as well in the area who enforce different rules and making sure that everyone's kind of safe underwater as well. And I'll think, let me see if I can find it. So this article, again, I keep referencing it, but it was the first time that a PADI or any article really wrote down kind of good rules and guidelines for assessing your shark dive operator. So you want to look for people with educational information, in water safety that demonstrates effective communication, detailing entry and exit and dive protocol, different companies that specifically look on animal treatment and always wanting to leave the sharks, just like Josh was saying, pulling posts and removing them prettier than they have them, and advising divers who aren't experienced like we are with sharks to not touch these sharks. So we are experienced in handling them, and we don't want any mistakes happening that could possibly put the sharks in a bad light. And the biggest thing also is conservation ethic. We want to always have a conservation-based approach in all of our diving that we do. And again, last thing, safety with other spearfishermen. So anytime, for example, I know I have been a safety diver and diver with Josh, where he dives a lot underwater. So you always want to help each other with the fish. If you know that there's a shark in the area, a good thing to use are noisemakers or honkers to communicate with your diver if a shark is maybe approaching them or going towards their fish. Basically just keeping your awareness and looking around, understanding their behavior, and just like any type of animal behavior, if you understand what triggers their hunt and prey mechanism and you understand how they work, it's really easy to safely interact with them. And I think that's all I got.
Well, I had a couple questions. From one diver asked, at what age and approximate size do the sharks reproduce? And another one had a question about the gestation periods for the sharks.
So they vary. It varies very largely species to species. A good example that's well studied is tiger sharks. So tiger sharks and many sharks are what are called ovoviviparous. So humans are viviparous, which means we give live birth. Snakes and alligators are oviparous, which means they lay eggs. And sharks are actually a combination of the two. So sharks have eggs inside their belly that still need to be pollinated by the female, if that makes sense. So, for example, a tiger shark has a gestation period sometimes between 16 and 18 months, and they can give birth to anywhere from 5 to 20 pups. But that also means that in the beginning, the cool thing with tiger sharks, they have upward of 300 to 400 eggs in their belly, right? So once they're fertilized, those eggs start to develop, and they'll actually start to eat each other in the womb. And then they actually, again, the University of Miami did a ultrasound study where they studied an ultrasound of sharks. They have their teeth fully formed when they are born, packed in almost like sardines. And then when they are born, if they don't swim away fast enough, their mother will turn around and eat them. So there's no maternal instinct. There's nothing like that. So their gestation period varies from species to species. They're almost always longer than humans. So it's almost always longer than 9 months. And how many pups they give birth to depends on the species. Larger species tend to give birth to less pups in general, like hammerheads, tigers, and great whites.
Okay, I got you. Okay, great. there were a couple other questions. A couple of people have had to leave, so they said they're going to send questions. What I'm going to do for everyone after is I have a couple of lists. What you all can do is you can send me an email. Some of you who joined us via Facebook, if you have other questions, we can always ask Josh to respond to it, and Lauren, and I'm sure they'd be happy to send us some information. So I want to say a special thank you to Josh and Lauren for sharing so many insights and their knowledge and experience with these sharks. They're out there every other day and they're diving with these sharks. They're feeding, they're handling, and they're introducing many, many divers to the shark world underwater. And of course, as Lauren said with her dad, and I experienced with the divers who came up and did a trip with us. They went out with Josh and Randy on Emerald Charters. They all changed so much their thought and perspective on the sharks. It was no longer, we're gonna catch them and we're gonna eat them with whatever. We're just gonna, now we have an appreciation, and we didn't want to eat them anymore. It was more like protect them. So there's a lot of information here. Thank you so much for sharing your time and your knowledge, and hopefully we'll have a couple of questions. Lauren could be found on Instagram, folks, and she is
Lauren the Fish.
Lauren the Fish on Instagram. So be sure to follow her if you want to see some of her cool pictures and whatnot. And some of you already followed. Ooh, Josh the shark guy. Didn't look much like a shark guy there, but that's Josh the shark guy there. So you can find him on Instagram. Thank you for the many comments that I'm getting as we go along. And many of you know I'm also on Instagram. I'm Ron Tia on Instagram. I'm trying to put more pictures up. I'd like to say a special thank you for all of you logging in, learning and asking questions, interacting, and joining us here. And again, thanks to Omer, Dive TNT, and of course, Sea Life Marine for bringing this presentation. The talk was very interesting. And so again, special thanks to Josh and Lauren for spending their time with us. We appreciate it very much. Maybe they'll come back and or continue with their education of so many divers and having a good time. And all of us are jealous that they're in the water and we can't get into the water.
Well, thank you guys.
Yeah, thanks so much for listening and inviting us out here.
Thanks a lot. Folks, at the end of the session, which we're at, I want to tell you, every time we do videos and things, as you all know from the TV, every show has got a blooper or two. And I couldn't leave y'all without sharing one blooper, which I can't go into the details of, but I think Riaz knows about it. But Josh and I discussed this whole session.
Some of us know more about it.
And we never said a word about this. Thank goodness for Lauren stepping in and helping us out. So again, thank you everybody. Appreciated you being here and look forward to seeing you guys diving soon. And if you ever get a chance, come up and dive with Lauren and Josh. They're great folks to dive with, great people to know, and we'll see you soon. Thanks again.
Thank you, guys.
Everybody. Good night.
Yeah, thank you so much, guys.
Okay,
Thank you guys for doing that on behalf of Sea Life. Goodbye. Oh, everybody's still there? Yeah, on behalf of Sea Life, we want to say thanks to you.